In 2016, I collaborated with Random House to produce a series of portraits, which coincided with their series of Shakespeare retellings. They were commissioning great authors to choose a play by Shakespeare and to retell it in prose. And I was fascinated by this project when I first heard about it through Howard Jacobson. And so he sat for me because I thought it would be interesting to do a portrait centered around his retelling of The Merchant of Venice. So he wrote a book called Shylock Is My Name and grappled with the figure of Shylock in his book. And I thought that Shylock was also a fascinating character to center the portrait around. So I did a simple painting of Howard as the figure of Shylock. It's very subtle. There's no indication that he is that figure. I simply painted him in a small head and shoulders portrait, wearing a white scarf and surrounded by darkness, to really be reminiscent of the Elizabethan paintings and the portraits that we're familiar of Shakespeare with a white rough collar against a very simple dark background. That was as far as the parallel went. There's something about the white scarf which is timeless, and the painting was reworked with a sort of heavy chiaroscuro reminiscent of the age, of portraiture of the age, and framed in a beautiful traditional frame. And that was it. But it was enough for the viewer to draw that immediate parallel with Shakespearean times and Howard with his very distinctive features. He was the perfect match for Shylock. That was all that needed to be done to draw the parallel. And I produced this small painting and I showed it to Random House, and it was enough for them to go, yes, let's continue with the series. And they started to enlist, encourage the other authors to sit for portraits. And so it was a really fun exercise. So I painted 5 other portraits in the series. There was a painting of Margaret Atwood, of Anne Tyler, of Gillian Flynn, and of Jo Nesbo, and Tracy Chevalier. In each of my portraits for the series, I chose to create a multi-layered narrative. So on one hand, they're a portrait of the author, and that says something about their work. On the other hand, they say something about the play they have chosen from Shakespeare, because each of Shakespeare's plays comes with its own imagery, its own visual, language. Take the play of Macbeth, for example. We associate it with the dagger, we associate it with blood on the hands. I mean, each of Shakespeare's plays, have this extraordinary sort of visual imagery and visual language really associated with each play. So I found that fascinating. And thirdly, another layer was to refer to the artistic tradition that has sprung from each painting. Because if you look historically, and this is what I found fascinating because I absolutely am very passionate about art history and about old master paintings. And there's each of Shakespeare's plays has led to this very specific pictorial tradition. A famous example is Millet's painting of Ophelia. But many artists before had taken on Shakespearean themes. And there are also, what I tried to explore in this series were other archetypal images that Shakespeare himself may have drawn inspiration from. Now, when you think of Shakespeare historically, on the timeline of art history, it's easy to disconnect Shakespeare's plays with art history, but he falls chronologically, he falls within the time period of Caravaggio, which is, you normally associate Shakespeare with Elizabethan art, which can be a little bit wooden and not very theatrical. But elsewhere in the world, you had the Baroque in Italy. And in Caravaggio's work really does form a better parallel with Shakespeare's plays. They're theatrical, the lighting is dramatic. And it's not long before Rembrandt was born. So this is really the time where artists, of the Tenebrists, of the Caravaggisti. And so it's a time of, drama in art. And so I drew upon some of the contemporary art historical sources within that series as well. So it was quite multi-layered. It was really a fascinating project for me.